Some of the biggest stories of the year happened in the courtroom, involving everything from health care to race to online privacy. 48 Hours correspondent Erin Moriarty and CBS News legal analyst Jack Ford are here with the top legal stories of 2012. Good morning to both of you.
It was a good year.
Right? Right?
Not
and a big
for everybody,
one.
but it was a big year.
Certainly gave us a lot to talk about.
Yes, it did.
It absolutely did. The biggest case being the healthcare ruling. Jack?
I think so. I think big for a number of reasons, Jeff. I think, first of all, because it was such an enormous issue and such a political issue. But I think in terms of the decision, what was so compelling about it was how it got decided and who was aligned. You know, nobody expected, for instance, the Chief Justice
doing what he did,
to be the one who was going to be the swing vote, to try to get everybody together. And nobody really expected that ultimately they were going to say, remember the big issue was, does Congress have the power under the constitutional provision that gives them the okay to regulate interstate commerce to say you have to buy this and if you don't it's going to cost you money? And everybody was astonished when the Supreme Court came back 5-4 and said, yes, they do, but forget that interstate commerce stuff. It's a tax. We're going to say it's a tax, even though no one else, it's not called a tax in the statute. So they found a really interesting way, and a curious way in some ways, to get to a point that they wanted to get to. No.
But what's interesting is how close it came to going the other way, because 1 month earlier, the Chief Justice was aligned with the conservative justices who would have voted against it. So it was just one vote that made the difference. But I also think we learned a huge lesson as the press, because we learned that it's not important to be first when you're talking about a Supreme Court ruling. Everybody's going to have it. You know, there's no scoop. You read it carefully before
get it right.
Because, of course, Fox and CNN both went on air and were incredibly embarrassed.
But you know, we saw the same thing, if you remember, going back to Bush versus Gore. A number of people announced a complete wrong result because they didn't read the opinion before everybody went on the air.
And by the way, another huge Supreme Court decision coming likely this June on same-sex marriage as well. So we'll do this all over again. Erin, you were heavily involved in covering the John Edwards trial. What did we learn there?
Well, I think we learned, number one, I mean, the Justice Department has had a real mixed record this year and actually the last 4 years. In John Edwards' case, you know, he won the battle. He was acquitted on one charge and there was a mistrial on the other, so he walked away, but I think he lost the war. So I think we learned more, unfortunately, about this particular individual than most of us really wanted to know. And the whole idea of him trying to come back. Right now, you know, he spent a fortune, maybe his fortune, on this case. He hasn't worked for 4 years. He's trying to get his law license back to active status. It'll be interesting to see what he does next.
Moving forward.
Jack, it changed a lot of people's views about politicians, too, and their personal lives.
Sure. You know, it was an astonishing fall from grace. I think when all of a sudden people start peeling back the layers of your life inside a courtroom, it's not the place where you ever want to have that done. And I think it also it was a cautionary tale about the notion of, you know, people think they assume this great power when they are at a certain level politically, and they start to think that the rules don't apply to them. And I think one of the morals of the John Edwards case was that regardless of where you are on a pedestal, you know what? The rules still apply, and you better be real careful about what you're doing.
And all you have is your word. And so now, who's going to trust him when he's lied to his family and to the public?
A lot of these cases that took place in 2012 have big implications moving forward, especially for online privacy. We were talking about this earlier in the show, Erin. I want to talk about the Rutgers case in particular, because this is something that's going to come back again and again, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. This was one of the first cases where all the evidence, almost all the important evidence, came from online. It was his own words used against him. But here's something that just shocked me this month. You would think that we'd learn from it. These are teens who might be rash about what they put online. But just this month, the U.S. attorney in New Orleans had to resign because 2 of his deputies went online anonymously and wrote snarky remarks about a defendant on an ongoing case. Like you would, these are adults, these are lawyers. So it's almost like we have not learned from the Rutgers case.
No matter what you put, what you tweet, what you put on Facebook.
And the other thing you see legally is that the law always lags a little bit behind new technology and new developments. Maybe that's not a bad thing, but we're seeing the Rutgers case was one of the situations where the law said we're going to have to catch up here to let people know what is okay and what isn't okay.
Lots more to look forward to. Interesting developments. Also, but we didn't talk about, by the way, the George Zimmerman trial, which is coming up. We don't have time to talk about that.
We'll have a lot to talk about that in the coming year.
We certainly will. Erin Moriarty, Jack Ford, thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca.